That's tough to swallow.
Catherine, are you?
No, well.
I'm sorry, are you over there just feeling that we don't give you any empathy for, like, the earlier parts of the season where this might have happened to you?
Yeah.
Well, those were pretty dramatic because they were right at the end.
Yeah.
This is just...
So maybe even worse, one might say. Hey everyone, welcome back to The Grid. We're here for episode 13, recapping the Barcelona GP.
Do you think 13 brings us good luck or bad luck?
Well, if you're a Ferrari fan, it certainly brought us bad luck.
Yeah.
Ooh.
But we'll get to that, so...
That's a
Yeah,
spoiler.
As a Ferrari fan and as a Vettel fan, I feel like...
It was a tough weekend, and, you know, I know you've been whining lately, Miss Red Bull over there. And, okay, no spoilers here, but I feel like you've been vindicated. Let's just start from the top.
No, we gotta start even further back. We gotta go to practice.
Okay. Kick us off.
I thought you'd be excited because Aston Martin came with all their new changes.
Well, yeah, I guess I'm just sour Sally over here because I know how they played out.
That's true, okay. But there was all the drama on track because they're calling it the Green Red Bull when it first rolled out.
And then there's that picture of all of the Red Bull pit wall drinking the lime green. Oh, that was chef's kiss.
But Aston Martin did get cleared. FIA was like, fine.
I mean, also, let's be real. Lawrence Stroll's gonna do what Lawrence Stroll's gonna do.
Catherine and I actually watched after the race, we were watching some of the pre-race interviews.
Jack is literally bringing this up. She considered shit on Lance Stroll.
So?
I would expect nothing less.
First of all, the man comes to the interview dressed in, like, athletic shorts. Like, everyone else is wearing, like, a nice little, they're, like, team polos and pants or, like, you know, like, nice shorts. He's wearing these athletic shorts, and he just, every question they asked him, the man just did not have an intelligent sentence to form.
I feel like he must have skipped the training that all their drivers get. I feel like a lot of drivers get some type of communications training.
I feel like their media teams must grill them because a lot of the drivers are very eloquent. I've always been pretty impressed. Compared to other sports, I think they usually do a good job. But, you know, I think if you're daddy's little driver, then maybe you get to skip PR 101. I don't know.
Also, they were talking, because he was sitting next to Lando Norris, and they were talking about, since they just got back from, a lot of drivers just got back from the U.S., the Miami Grand Prix, and what the drivers did in their off time. And Lando had gone golfing at Augusta, and that's where the Masters is, so that's a big tournament in golf. And the interviewers were saying, wow, that's impressive, like, how did you get to golf there? You have to be invited. And he was saying something about how, like, Zach Brown knew someone, and I'm like, it's Lando Norris. Like, of course they're gonna allow him to golf in Augusta. Like, someone's gonna invite him. He's a big golfer. And Lance was just smirking the whole time, and I feel like he must have golfed there before or something, because he was just smirking the entire interview, like, psh, I've done that before. It's not too special.
He's probably like, oh,
My
doors
dad
are
can buy
closed to you. Which also, like, isn't Lando's family pretty loaded?
Which is very surprising because, I mean, you see how Stroll acts and then you see how Norris acts in their night and day.
I guess maybe it's different when you report to your literal dad versus even just, like, does Stroll report to Mike Crack or straight to daddy? Like,
I still think that also the team principal's name, too, is just hilarious.
What else do we see in practice?
Practice, I feel like I only watched P3.
Okay.
And that one was pretty...
That one was pretty chill.
Nothing like... Although I did think it was very interesting because the commentators were saying throughout the entirety of P3, even though we didn't really see the results on the board, they were very complimentary of McLaren and thought that this was going to be McLaren's weekend, which, spoiler, it wasn't. But
I think because they brought so many upgrades, they thought it was going to be their weekend.
Apparently, and granted, like, when we're watching practice and we're watching qualifying, you can see the different sectors, see how fast the cars are going, but, not watching each car individually. But apparently, I'm sure they saw something in the times that they were putting up, thought it was going to be really good results for McLaren this weekend, and yeah, that really fell short.
The other thing in practice was that they were having young drivers drive in some of the cars.
I think I did see something about they want to give newer drivers more time before they're signed to an F1 team. Yeah, that way teams are able to kind of see the skill set in an F1 car versus only seeing them in, like, F2, etc. But yeah, Kubica, I mean, obviously, that guy's what, like 40?
I'm not sure, but he looks pretty old. I think just because of, like, his hairline.
Well, and he raced for a long time, and then he was a reserve driver last year, and I know we talked about reserve drivers on our last episode, but he was the one who truly embarrassed Mazepin because he got points as a reserve driver filling in, making Mazepin 21st out of 20 drivers in the championship.
I'm really glad we don't have to talk about Mazepin anymore.
Oh, it's such a relief. Which I am excited to talk about the Haas's this weekend. So, anything else on practice, or can we skip to qualifying?
You hop on into qualifying.
Well, spoiler, since we're talking about Haas, Mick Schumacher did make his first ever appearance in Q3, and both Haas's made it to Q3. Magnussen had great results. I think he was, 5? Or yeah, and then he got knocked down to 8. Mm-hmm. But great results for both Haas's, and did they bring upgrades?
No, they were
I was going to say, I don't think so.
Did you not listen to Fun Fact Friday?
I did, but not all of us have a steel trap for a memory jack.
It's a subtle plug. Every race weekend, one of us gals is going to be bringing you 5 facts before each race, and that was one of Catherine's facts before the race this weekend.
And if you're like me and you can't remember them, we'll be saving them to our story highlights so you can go back and watch all of our fun facts in one place.
And if you're like me, you recorded more than 5 fun facts. You got a little carried away, but we'll be slimming them down.
So it was a big weekend for Haas.
Big weekend for Haas, big weekend for Mercedes.
Yeah.
They did super well in practice, and I was wondering if they would keep it up, and they did. What did they end up qualifying? Russell was 4th, and Hamilton was 6th.
Yeah, great results for them, and I know there was a little bit of Mercedes-Haas tension during the race, which we can cover in a bit, but overall, great qualifying for Ferrari as well.
Yeah.
Charles Leclerc took pole, which is very significant here in Barcelona. It is the track that has the highest rate of converting poles to wins. Prior to this weekend, it was 76% of the pole setters went on to take the win here in Barcelona.
Yeah.
And it's been a devastating weekend for a lot of reasons. But.
Well, I was really upset during qualifying because Max obviously got second and his DRS didn't open, which was an issue in qualifying. We'll talk about later. It was an issue in the race. It's been an issue before, and it's something they obviously couldn't fix from qualifying to the race. So hopefully they'll have that turned around for Monaco.
Also, we saw that Drake lost a lot of money betting on Leclerc because I'm sure he looked at that stat of like, hey, this is the race where if they get pole, they're very likely, and those are very good odds to get to win the race. And sadly, like my fantasy team, Drake's pockets were just tanked.
Was that the hood? Seemed like you were ready for that.
No, it just came to me at the moment. It was great.
Wow,
Thank you.
What else? Jack, do you want to recap?
Well, let's just talk about this for a second here. Apparently...
Hit me with it.
Apparently Lando had hay fever.
Which, first of all...
Oh my gosh.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that allergies?
It's seasonal allergies.
Just allergies. And the amount of times that the commentators throughout qualifying and the race said, Lando was sick, had hay fever, or just like recovering from illness was insane to me.
It was. But what I read afterwards, he does have tonsillitis.
Yes, and that's pretty severe.
The commentators did him dirty with that because they kept on, they're like, oh, he's driving through illness. Look at him, like, scoring this high. And the entire time, everyone's thinking, like, he has allergies. Like, people function every day with, like, throw an antihistamine at him, like, he'll be fine.
Yeah, don't hit on the hay fever. Hit on the tonsillitis. As somebody who did have, like, pretty serious tonsillitis, to the point where, I mean, I won't get into the gory details, but that can really mess with you. I appreciate a bout of tonsillitis far more than I appreciate hay fever.
Yeah, if they would have said tonsillitis from the beginning, I would have been like, okay, yeah, I get it. Like, that would suck. But the hay fever, I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
To circle back to qualifying results, right? We'd been hyping them up all weekend, very hopeful with the upgrades. They were looking strong going into qualifying. Lando actually got out in Q2, which was devastating because he'd actually put up on his last lap a great time, but it appeared that all 4 tires had left the track area at one point throughout that lap, so of course that time was disqualified, so he got out in Q2. Ricciardo actually made it to Q3, which looked very promising for the race. I'm not sure what happened. He right off the bat dropped.
He had a bad start, yeah.
Really bad start, and we won't get the race, but like was looking very strong for a second for him in terms of the performance that he's been doing. And obviously at the time, not knowing that Lando was suffering a more severe illness, I just thought, all right, well, great. Another terrible weekend for McLaren in terms of having all this momentum, all this hope, and then it being dashed there. And especially knowing this race and how important it is to qualify well since that conversion rate is so strong. So, yeah, not the weekend we had hoped. We'll see if Monaco can give us some better results. But,
well, if it makes you feel any better, you know, Aston Martin's over here just touting all of their advancements, all of their upgrades. We've got the quote-unquote green Red Bull, and both of them are out in Q1. So, as a Vettel fan...
When Vettel also got, I don't know if you heard his radio, where he was just shocked when he had got out in Q1.
They were like, oh, that's P16, and he was like, serious? Like, are you joking? They were like,
he was pissed.
Yeah.
And I get that too, because even though, right, like, I mean, Vettel's a championship winning driver, and I'm sure he had a lot of promises coming onto this team. And so and especially too to get those type of results, like I'm sure we're not expecting him to get P1, but like 16?
No, but I mean, he basically said as long as he's in the sport, he wants to be racing for the win or at least be competitive for the win.
Yeah.
And he has expressed his frustrations multiple times this season already, so it's not boding well for Vettel fans. But should we go ahead and talk about the race, ladies?
I think so.
To recap the race results, and in true fashion, because Drake lost a ton of money on this race, we starting from the bottom because we here, you know?
The whole team is fucking here.
All right. So we had 2 people who didn't finish, aka a DNF, and that would be Charles Leclerc, who races for Ferrari, and Zhou Guanyu, who races for Alfa Romeo. In 18th, we had Alex Albon. He races for Williams. In 17th, Kevin Magnussen, who races for Haas. In 16th, Nicholas Latifi races for Williams. In 15th, Lance Stroll, who races for Aston Martin. In 14th, Mick Schumacher with Haas. In 13th, Pierre Gasly with AlphaTauri. In 12th, Danny Rick with McLaren. In 11th, Sebastian Vettel with Aston Martin. In 10th, Yuki Tsunoda with AlphaTauri. In 9th, Fernando Alonso with Alpine. This was his home race, so he did get into the points for that. In 8th, Lando Norris, a missed fighting disease, and he races for McLaren. In 7th, Esteban Ocon races for Alpine. In 6th, Valtteri Bottas with Alfa Romeo. In 5th, Lewis Hamilton for Mercedes. In 4th, Carlos Sainz for Ferrari. And then we entered the podium here. In 3rd, George Russell for Mercedes. In 2nd, Sergio Perez for Red Bull. And in 1st, Max Verstappen for Red Bull.
That double Red Bull podium.
We hate to see it.
1-2.
We don't love to see it, but Mercedes, though.
They're back again.
Jeff will choose any team that's not Red Bull.
You know, I just love a little pizzazz added to the action here, you know?
Some gals like to stir the pot.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of the race, I think initially the presumption that pole setter goes on to win the race was looking really strong. Leclerc had a great start, great getaway, was leading the race very, very strongly for the first, 26 or so laps. And to the heartbreak of Ferrari fans everywhere, just had an issue with the car. And I think that's what was so devastating about it was, you know, it's one thing if there's almost an incident or if somebody just overtakes you and you lose out that way. But when the car, it just started slowing down and it just died. That's tough to swallow.
Catherine, are you?
I know it well.
I'm sorry, are you over there just feeling that we don't give you any empathy for, like, the earlier parts of the season where this might have happened to you?
Yeah.
Well, those were pretty dramatic because they were right at the end.
Yeah.
This is just...
So maybe even worse, one might say. I think the same worry that I had a couple races ago with the Red Bull engine, now we're kind of worried maybe there's something wrong with the Ferrari engine because Guan Yu Zhou had issues too, and he was a DNF.
Mm-hmm. Isn't this the second race where he was a DNF?
I believe so.
Because you picked him up last week in your fantasy team and for Miami, and he was a DNF there too, and he had car trouble there as well.
Yeah, and his car trouble was kind of at the beginning of the race too, I thought.
Sad to see because I think at the start of the season, and granted, I mean, I know not a lot of the season is still passed yet, but he was putting up pretty good times for being a rookie driver. Mm-hmm. And, like, he was actually seeing pretty great results. I was very impressed with him.
Yeah, because he was saying it's going to hinder his development as an F1 driver.
Yeah.
I mean, how many races? What is that? This, 6th race? So...
Third of the races, you're DNF due to car issues outside your control.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think when he has had equipment that performs, he's performed well.
Yeah.
And he has showed a lot of promise as a driver. And so, I mean, obviously all drivers get really frustrated when their equipment fails them, but it still sucks every time. And also, yes, you know, as a Red Bull fan, I'm sure you're a little relieved to see, but it also just makes for a less exciting race. Like, you want to see it go down to the end.
No, because I feel like that's what Formula One is about. It's like all these unexpected things. It's not just the driver, it's the car. So seeing it happen pretty equally, because it would be a little disappointing if Leclerc completely got through the Drivers' Championship before all the races were through.
Yeah.
Just because Max had 2 DNFs already.
So before we get to one of the, like, an altercation pretty early in the race, I want to talk about, there was one turn on the track where we saw 2 pretty big, at first we thought it was a mistake because Carlos Sainz spun out and everyone was saying, oh, like, and then we even watched it back, we were like, that was, like, really, usually we don't see that big of an error from him, like, no one was around him, it seemed like he had locked up or, like, didn't take the turn right. And then Max had the same issue going around that same curve, and I think they were thinking something with the heat, either in the tires were wearing weird, or something might have been on the track, but they seem to be the only 2 drivers that really struggled with that turn.
Well, what they said is that there was a gust of wind right at turn 4
that
actually hit both Sainz and Max as they went around.
And speaking of early incidents, I think we did get a little bit ahead of ourselves. We forgot to mention the incident in lap 1 between Hamilton and Magnussen, which I think was particularly interesting just because both of them had really good qualifyings. And considering, you know, Hamilton has been struggling this season, undoubtedly, especially compared to his teammate, I think the Mercedes had a really great weekend overall, really showed up, made a lot of improvements. But, you know, watching it back, I'm a K-Mag fan. I've had him on my fantasy team. But truly, I don't think Hamilton was at fault. I think K-Mag was just a little over-aggressive. It was ruled as a racing incident by the FIA, especially lap 1. But he turned into Hamilton, like, pretty hard, sent them off. Hamilton had to go into the pits. I think he got a puncture because they did not replace his front wing. Magnussen, I'm not entirely sure how much damage he sustained from that.
I think he went off track, but then came back on, right?
But I think he just came right back on. I don't think he pitted immediately. Yeah. That incident put him in 20th place, considering he had started P6 after a good qualifying, which it's kind of wild to say that P6 is a good qualifying for Hamilton, but this season it is. And then actually had a really remarkable race because initially wanted to even retire the car. He was on the radio basically saying, like, I don't know about this. I think maybe we should save the engine. And his engineer said on the radio, nope, we're getting points. We think we can do at least P8. Let's go. And for him to come back, he ended up in P4. It was a pretty good race for Hamilton.
Jack, just watching my facial reactions. How much more can I roll my eyes? I agree with you. It was a really good race for Hamilton.
And let's be honest, Catherine, it's probably much more fun watching Hamilton now that he's, like, not actually a threat to Max.
No, I think it was a really great race to watch. I think what actually threw me, his comment. I just want to quit. I want to be out. You're 7-time world champion, and you're just gonna, once your car is bad for 1 year, just have that attitude. It was so disappointing to see. It's so unsportsmanlike. And Jack and I remember Jack was at the same level as me, so it's not just me, but it was difficult to watch, and seeing him get driver of the day was kind of disappointing.
See, I think the result definitely earned driver of the day. Yeah. But I feel like that's how you can just tell he's so in his head.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I know, I thought it was really interesting how people were all saying or even, I think this was a Mercedes post themselves. I don't know if you guys are Harry Styles fans at all, but he just released an album called Harry's House, and they had Lewis on the cover instead saying it's Lewis's house. I thought that was a little overhyped.
Especially since Russell's still doing better than him.
But you gotta... I wonder if they just, know how Lewis is. And this is probably really reminiscent of his times when he was more in the midfield. Obviously, it seems like Mercedes' car is back.
It's nice to see that the team is trying to build him up because I really do think he's just been so off on the mental game.
Yes.
And it's still early in the season. And I heard the commentators say this. They were really hoping that the regulation changes made it a bigger scramble for the championship so that, instead of just being a Mercedes Red Bull like it was last year, you want more contenders in the fight for the championships. And they were like, we really want to see a true 3-way fight.
Sure.
And so they were like, it sounds and looks like Mercedes is starting to be a challenge, especially with how consistently George Russell has been performing for the team. At least for the Constructors' Championship, it could be a good 3-way battle.
I think we're on track for our bets of 8 of the 10 teams to get a podium at least once this season.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of our other predictions may or may not be panning out to different degrees, so we will revisit those later in the season, but for now at least, this was a hard week for my fantasy team. I actually dropped George Russell, if you can believe it, to pick up Lando Norris.
Amidst the hay fever.
Well, I was unaware of a hay fever at the time.
Bold move.
It was clearly the wrong one. Although I will say, looking ahead for next week, I have had Charles Leclerc on my fantasy team all year, and knowing that Monaco is next week, it's his home race.
You're dropping him?
I already did. I dropped him.
I will be dropping him as well.
He has a curse. He's set pole twice. He's never finished. I think he's raced at, Monaco 5 times now?
Maybe.
Or something like that.
And never finished.
Never finished a race in Monaco.
This is the race. This is the time he breaks the curse.
You know what?
Jack's a better Ferrari fan than you.
Hey, she's on record.
I really am.
Jack's just like everyone's fan except for Red Bull.
She's doing it just to spite me, I swear to God.
I'm usually a pretty pleasant Red Bull fan. I just thought it was interesting that Mercedes is coming back.
Pleasant Red Bull fan is a bit of a stretch.
I love Checo. I just was saying, I was like hoping Checo was getting on the podium because I love Checo's dad. Like Checo's dad.
Okay, you love Checo. Catherine doesn't.
Yeah.
Catherine, are you even a Red Bull fan or are you just a Max fan?
No, we cleared this up like 2 episodes ago, but it's because of Checo's performance. He's just not a good qualifier.
And Max, like, shouts him out every time. He's like, thanks for being such a great teammate. And Catherine's over here like, why are you such a bad teammate?
He was a great teammate this race.
Oh, we do need to talk about that.
Checo was an insanely good teammate this race, so if you had any doubt in your mind...
I never thought he was a bad teammate. I just need him to be closer to Max. Like, Leclerc and Sainz are close. I need Checo and Max to be closer.
Yeah, and I think this weekend we've touched briefly or almost talked around team orders and what that means in terms of first and second drivers, which we covered that a little bit more in depth on our last episode when we did the F1 for beginners. But I think this week was a great example of team orders and a true case of first and second driver for Red Bull.
Although I read Checo's interview afterwards, his points on it were that they were on different strategies. Which almost made me feel like he was covering, but also could be true. I'm not really sure.
Again, they put these people through PR master classes.
Right.
Well, hang on. Before we get too deep, Catherine, you want to walk us through what happened?
Sure. And I'm not actually sure what lap that it was. It was later in the race. Checo was leading the race. Max was right behind. And they had the 2 cars switch. So Checo's engineer came on and told him that he needs to let Max through. I think they said something about the pace at that point. Checo said, that's unfair, but okay. Max ended up taking first and then obviously winning and getting on podium.
Well, and I don't think it was... That was definitely the most blatant incident, but even earlier in the race, when Max was having problems, or when Max went off on the gravel, which at the time looked like a driver error, I know Checo had basically said, okay, like, does that mean, like, I can go for it then? Like, am I in the clear? Like, more or less, Max is fucked up, like, so am I good to go for the win because I want to?
Right.
And so I know there was almost, like, 2 different incidents. I think the hardest one to watch was definitely where they actually just made, Checo let Max by, but it's hard. It's hard. And
it is. And I think Jack and I were even talking about when we were watching the race, it does make sense. If you think about it logically, who's going to be in the running for the Drivers' Championship?
Yeah.
It's going to be Max. It's not going to be Checo, just even given the points already and the pace. But it is hard to see. It was hard to see with Bottas and Hamilton for all those years, too.
Well, and especially with Max, like, he's the reigning world champion, so not only is performance like this year, but you're looking to ride and get consecutive titles if you can.
Right.
So it's almost... Also, I mean, it's very clear Max is their number 1 driver. He's literally changed his number from 33 to number 1. Like... I don't know how much more blatant you can be.
I mean, we'll see for the rest of the season. I feel like we're going to see it with other teams as well once the season goes on. It was surprising to see it this early on, but I think they knew that Max needed the extra points because 25 versus 18, and I think Checo actually ended up getting 19 because he got fastest lap. All those points matter, and at least for the team, for Red Bull, it was a great result.
One of the other things towards the end of the race that was interesting was the call from the Mercedes engineers to Hamilton and Russell to back off. Something to do with the amount of fuel that was left in the cars. I think Hamilton had to let Sainz pass him at one point because to conserve fuel. So I thought that was interesting too. Another play of not just driver skill or how fast we can go, but hey, like, you guys got to slow it down. We're we're not going to be able to sustain this until the end.
And that was super sad to see because I'm pretty sure it was the last lap of the race.
Yeah.
And we've seen what happens when you end a race with not enough fuel.
I'm sorry, Mary, what driver was that?
In Hungary last year, Sebastian Vettel actually had his podium taken away from him after the fact because his car did not have the required 1 liter of fuel at the end of the race. It's not enough for our newer F1 fans for the car to just make it over the finish line. You actually have to have a full liter of gas left in the tank after the race is over. And I think part of that is just due to some safety regulations, but there's clearly a penalty there. And I know Sebastian lost the podium. I don't actually know how far he fell in the points or what that ramification was. So I could see Mercedes making the strategic decision of better to give up 1 place versus take a penalty and perhaps fall further down the grid in terms of actual points awarded.
Right.
Mm-hmm. There's the Vettel plug.
Yep.
Every episode, guys. You know.
But yeah, I really was, in all honesty, even though I am such a big fan of Sainz, I was really rooting for Russell to get a podium. I felt like he deserved it that race. I'm not a huge Russell fan for the most part, but I think in this circumstance, he deserved to be on it. And I felt like something as silly as fuel shouldn't have kept him from it. So I am, in this instance, glad that he got to stand on the podium.
Even if it meant beating out your man and my man, Carlos Sainz.
I know, Mary. I know. It's heartbreaking.
You didn't want another cool down room shot with Sainz?
I mean,
everybody kept their shirts on this week.
Although they were just cussing every other word so they wouldn't get recorded, which was
hysterical. I loved that for them.
And it was actually really funny to watch at parts where the broadcast was completely silent.
And Jack and I were like, this is really awkward. Just like watch them standing in this room without any sound.
Yeah.
And then the commentators came on. They're like, just so you guys know, there's no sound because the drivers think it's funny and are cussing every other word because they know we can't broadcast it.
Which was, I mean,
between that and taking their shirts off, like, boys, go ahead. Protest a little.
Stick it to the man. Stick it to the FIA.
I don't mind.
But I think looking forward, worried about fantasy with Leclerc and Monaco. I'm worried about Monaco in general. That race makes me nervous.
I was going to say, I mean, big Ferrari fan here. Love Ferrari, but I don't think Charles can overcome the curse. I have dropped him for fantasy. Not for actual support during race weekend. Okay, just to be crystal clear. But, yes, he has been replaced. He will go right back on the fantasy team after Monaco. But I am a little worried, not only for Ferrari, but just in general. I think Monaco can get a little dicey. It's tight. There's no room for error. It's always a spectacle. So I'm looking forward to it. But as a fan, little apprehensive, personally.
This will be a good one to watch for qualifying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Catherine and I were talking about this past race weekend. Monaco is iconic. It would be very fun to go in person. They always put on a great show, but in terms of the race itself, not as fun for the fans, to be honest. And just like you said, Catherine, really important how qualifying turns out. And I'm really just hoping that we see something from McLaren this weekend because I can't take it. I can't take it anymore.
Who knows? Maybe Lando will just come out hot.
And it is Danny Rick's track. This is like one of his favorite tracks.
It is. It's a toss-up which one it'll be, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just sitting over here on the other side of the table and feeling a little bit wanting to go against the two of you, but maybe it's Leclerc's comeback year. Maybe Monaco will be the year. This will be the year that he breaks the Monaco curse.
God, I hope so.
I could live without.
Way to stay true to you, Catherine. Well, if you've been listening this far, thanks for listening. We love to have you here. You can check out our website, gridgals.com. There's links to all our socials on there. Please, wherever you listen to podcasts, like, subscribe. And if you have any questions, or we did a beginner's guide to F1 last week for our new fans. So if you have any any content that you want us to do in the future on non-race weekends, please email us, gridgals@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much.
And that's the checkered flag for this session. We'll catch you back on the grid next week.